Welcome to the Energetic Psyche, a weekly podcast normally hosted by yours truly, Dr. Adrian Campbell, where we talk about real life, challenge assumptions, and explore different ways of being in the world. This week, I have a special guest host who will be interviewing me. Join us as we talk a little bit about my childhood, my time in the military, working in tech, and how I made the switch to psychology and energy healing. I hope you enjoy this episode. Welcome to the Energetic Psyche, a weekly podcast normally hosted by yours truly, Dr. Adrian Campbell, where we talk about real life, challenge assumptions, and explore different ways of being in the world. This week, we're doing something a little different. I have a special guest host who will be interviewing me. So I hope you enjoy this episode as we talk a little bit about my childhood, my time in the military, working in tech, and how I made the switch to psychology and energy healing. So my guest host here, Mr. Dan Baumer. So Dan and I met, what did we figure, like 4 or 5 years ago, I think?
I think 5 years ago now.
Yeah, through Veterans Yoga Project. We worked on a few things together for them and then met at one of the retreats up at Feathered Pipe Ranch, which was awesome. And over the years, just stayed in touch, became friends. And so here we are today. So welcome. Thanks for agreeing to interview me, Dan. I appreciate it.
It's my pleasure entirely. I'm excited to do this. I've watched all of your shows, and I think I know how to do this. You've been hosting. You've been doing a great job at hosting and making your guests look great and drawing information out of them. I hope that I could do the same without embarrassing myself and making you look great in the process. My guest today on the Energetic Psyche is Dr. Adrian Campbell. She is a certified professional coach, Reiki Master, and U.S. military veteran with an undergraduate and graduate degrees in electrical science and psychology and a doctorate in Somatic Depth Psychology from Pacifica Graduate Institute. She currently maintains a private coaching practice and presents internationally on topics relating to well-being and personal development from a somatic depth psychological viewpoint. That is very fantastic. I understand most of that, but not having the same background that you do, I have a couple questions about that. And if you could clear them up, you'll make me a smarter person. Explain somatic depth psychology a little bit.
Sure. Yeah. So I'll explain it a little bit. And then I think once we get into like schooling, it'll become even more obvious in the type of work. But basically, somatic psychology studies how we experience the world through our bodies. So I think we think a lot of like body experiences through a physiological lens, which is like heartbeat, central nervous system, like your legs, your arms, and all of that. But physiology is how our body is experiencing the world, whereas somatics is about how we experience the world through our body. So how the different postures we hold, or the temperature, or the way we place ourselves in a room, how we're surrounded by people, how that impacts the way that we experience what we're experiencing, I guess, is like the easiest way to put it. So that's somatic psychology. And then depth psychology. So I studied at Pacifica, which is a primarily like Jungian institution. And when I say Jungian, I'm talking about Carl Jung. Used to be besties with Freud. There's a whole story there, but like whatever. And so Carl Jung, his big like theory that was very different from Freud had to do with the collective unconscious. So that we're all connected at the level of the unconscious. We have a personal unconscious, a cultural unconscious, and then there's this almost this ocean of consciousness that we all contribute to and participate within. And dreams are a big part of that. Image is a big part of that. So that's depth psychology. And so my degree really looks at how the unconscious mind and the body come together and how we can describe the way that we experience the world or come to better understand how we experience the world through the connection of the unconscious mind and the body.
I have lots of, it answers the question, but it begs a dozen other follow-up questions, which I'm not going to ask you right now, because I suspect that we're going to cover a lot of that today, if not in subsequent episodes of the Energetic Psyche. If there's something that really escapes me, my knowledge, by the end of this, I'll be sure to ask you, because it sounds pretty fascinating.
You know, I spent a lot of years on it, so I think so too.
Yeah, I hope that's something that piques your interest after all these years.
Right.
Let's see. We're here to talk about you, your background, your experiences, your education, what you've got going on. I don't know where to begin other than maybe the beginning.
Sure. Yeah, we can start right in the beginning. So I grew up in Southern California. I'd say Orange County area primarily. I went to elementary school, middle school, and high school. To be honest, a little all over the place. My upbringing was slightly chaotic, which could be its entire own episode all on its own. Right. But I really do call like Orange County and Southern Orange County my home. So Huntington Beach was the beach that I played at as a little girl, that I took the bus to every single day, every summer in high school. And when I think of home, that's really the area that I think of. And I still have a lot of family there, which is nice. So I go back and visit a lot. So I grew up there, loved Southern California weather and all of that because I didn't know what I was missing yet. Grew up riding dirt bikes, playing sports, building model rockets, painting, writing poetry. My dad was really great in that he didn't really see gender. So it was never like girls do this and boys do that. He had 2 daughters and we did everything. So I even remember
those traditional roles. Yeah, good.
Yeah. And so like the fact that I was a female or a girl, like never really came into my thought as like a limiting belief or I couldn't do something because of that until I joined the military. That's the first time it really hit. Yeah. But it was really nice growing up that way because I really wasn't limited. Like I remember building model rockets and strapping my Barbie to one to like go up into space, you know?
You do.
Yeah, as you do. And he let us do crazy things like ride dirt bikes, you know, when we were little girls, when a lot of my friends, like they were just playing with Barbies, you know, or coloring or whatever. So,
and they had to buy the astronaut Barbie. You made your own.
Right. I crafted her. I even cut her hair. She was cool. Yeah. So that was really nice. That was really cool. High school was a little bit challenging for me. Like I mentioned, I had a bit of a chaotic upbringing, and when hormones hit and all of that, you know, I experienced a lot of difficult emotions and some difficult times dealing with being in a single parent household. And, you know, my parents had a lot of custody battles and things when I was growing up. So it was a little rough. And my senior year of high school, I actually had 3 friends die in just a couple months. So I experienced grief very young and very heavily, like really quick. And I think especially when we're that young, we already have such a heightened sense of emotion that things like that are even more impactful. 2 of them took their own lives and 1 died of a heart attack. So it was very... Oh, I'm going to get teary. I already told you that would probably happen tonight.
You warned me.
I did. And anyone that knows me knows this is how I am. So it's fine. But it was a really big deal. And dealing with those emotions my senior year of high school was really, really challenging. And I actually ended up dropping out of school. So I'm not a high school graduate, even though I have a PhD now. I know it's wild. But I did go back and get my GED because my mother was like, you're going to get it. Like she forced me. And I remember when I dropped out of high school, it wasn't because I didn't want to go to school. I just couldn't handle going back to that school because of everything that had happened. So I was already 18 because I dropped out 2 days before my 18th birthday. So I started taking classes at the community college while my friends were still in high school because I've always had a thing for school. It's just kind of my jam. So my mom was like, go get your GED. I was like, you're crazy. I don't need it. I'm already in college, but I did it anyway. And I was really glad that I did because when I decided to join the Coast Guard, they were like, we need your high school diploma. And I was like, oh God, I don't have one. And they were like, what? So yeah, so it worked out, but yeah.
Now, how old were you when you joined the Coast Guard? Did you do that?
So
did you do that right after getting your GED, or did you wait a while?
It actually was pretty soon after getting my GED, because I waited to get my GED until I had been out of school for about a year and a half. I was 19 when I joined the Coast Guard. I actually turned 20 in boot camp, which was a whole thing. If you're military, just take a minute and imagine what being in boot camp for your birthday could be like. And that's exactly what it was like.
A lot of cake and funny hats.
Well, because my mom sent me a freaking birthday care package. And I told everyone, do not send me anything. Don't let them know. And of course, I get all these cards because everyone's all supportive. And, you know, as soon as the company commanders found out, oh my God, I'm pretty sure I spent the entire day just getting beat on. It was terrible, as they do. But yeah, no, you know, it was a total fluke. Like when I joined the Coast Guard, I like to call it my early life crisis. I was 19 years old. Like I said, I had dropped out of high school. I'd been living on my own for about a year and a half and had moved back home so that I could focus on college. And I was in school to be a first grade teacher. Like I had wanted to be a first grade teacher since I was a little girl. And my best friend at the time called me and told me she was getting married. And I don't know, something in me just kind of snapped. And I like looked around at my life and said, I am not ready to settle down. I can't do this. I need to get out of here. And back in the day, you know, we had phone books, which for the young kids, they don't know what that is. But there's lots of pictures and words. And whenever I was stumped, I would open a phone book and just flip pages. And it would help me think because I'd see all the different words and images. And I saw an ad for the Coast Guard. And at the time I was living in Carmel, California, up in Central California with my mother. And the station in Monterey was like 10 minutes away. So I called and I said, hey, thinking about joining the Coast Guard. I don't know anything about it. Can I come down there? And they were like, yeah, we're about to go on a boat ride if you want to come. And I was like, okay. So I literally just drove down there. And they gave me one of those really cool orange float coats. And we took the small boat and went down the coast of California, like all the way down to Big Sur and back. We went wave jumping.
Wow.
I mean, oh my God, I was in love. I was like, that's it. I know what I'm doing with my life. I like,
you got a cruise and the orange coat.
Yeah, I got all of it. And I came back and I told my family, I'm like, I'm joining the Coast Guard. And my mom, we were at dinner. My mom spit her food out and all the kids just kind of stared at me. And I remember my stepdad was the only one that was like, oh, good for you. And I joined in like 3 days later. I called the recruiter, got the ASVAB done. And like, that was it. And the whole time my mom just thought it was a phase. She was like, this isn't really happening. She's going to change her mind. And I remember when
do you have any military in your family, or is this
no
a tradition?
Well,
so
that's not true. My mom's side is all Italian, and they're all on back east for the most part. And all of my great uncles were Navy because it's what you did back then. Mm-hmm. So I definitely have had moments of ribbing with them because Navy and Coast Guard.
Navy, Coast Guard, right.
Yeah. But other than that, no. And actually, my dad's side of the family, primarily like Ivy League engineering types. And even though my grandpa had been in the Navy, he was like almost, back then it was almost like being drafted. Like it's what you did. Right. And he actually never got underway or anything like that. He just got a free college education from it. So my dad's side of the family was very against me joining. Took my dad about a year to come around, and then he was immensely proud. But his mother, I'm pretty sure, is still not okay with the choice all these years later. Yeah, so
she knows that you're out now and you survived and everything's okay.
She does.
She's still a little angst about it, yeah?
Yeah. I think, I don't know if it's just because I'm a female or if it's because it's our family. I don't know, but she's not a fan. So at this point, I've just accepted it. She's 96 and She's going to think what she wants, and that's all right.
Right. I sense that you've weathered that pretty well. I think you've accepted her and you've processed her disdain pretty well.
Yeah. You work through it.
I even mentioned to my son, my son's in the Navy right now. I said, "Oh, I was referring to my friend Adrian, and she was in the Coast Guard." And he even made that little sound, that little.
Exactly, because it's what we do. I mean, like you and I were just talking about this the other day, because there was someone we know who tried to like make fun of me for being Coast Guard, but they were never military, and it's like, you don't get to do that. Nope. Everybody else, though, if you're military and you don't give me some shit for being in the Coast Guard, I might wonder what's wrong with you, because it's what we do.
It's just normal communication. It's the lexicon.
Yep, exactly.
But anyways, I think I've totally dragged you off track. You were 19 and a half, just got your GED. You're 3 days later, you're talking to the recruiter. You're taking your ASVAB, your Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery. Is that what it is?
Good job, Army.
That's stuck way back in my brain somewhere. That's the test that everybody's got to take to see whether you could, catch a bullet or send a bullet.
Well, and I remember the recruiter, like, I didn't know anything about the military. I was not the kid growing up that was like, I can't wait to join the service. I mean, when I was in high school, I was a little punk rocker with ripped jeans, Doc Martens, causing havoc. Oh, yeah. Like, when I went back to my high school and was like, yeah, so I joined the Coast Guard, my teachers were like,
that went over well.
What?
Yeah.
They were like, you're in the military? I was like, yeah. They were like, what? Yeah. So like when I took my ASVAB, I got a pretty high score. I think I got like a 89 or something. And the recruiter, the Coast Guard is notoriously difficult to get into, because they've always had enough interest. So it wasn't as big of a deal. I don't know if that's exact, like how it is these days, but back then I would call 3 times for one call back. Like it was difficult. And I finally got a hold of them and said, look, if you don't talk to me, I'm not joining. And so they were like, okay. And I said, well, what job do I qualify for? Because the guys I had met at that station gave me what we call the Blue Jacket Manual. And it's the Coast Guard manual. It tells you all the jobs. So I'd been looking at all the different jobs in the Coast Guard and what I wanted to do. And the recruiter was a cook. And he said, look, okay, you scored high enough. You can do whatever you want. And I was like, I don't know what that means. Like, I'm not really sure which. And he said, seriously, any job in the whole Coast Guard you want, you qualify for. So just pick what you want. And I was like, whoa, all right. So I'm like flipping through. And now remember, like I joined because I wanted to travel and have fun. Like I didn't join for education or job, vocational help or anything like that. I just wanted to peace out for a bit, if you will. And so I chose a job that I knew I wouldn't be able to do anywhere else. And that was running weapons systems. So I ran the 76 millimeter gun and the CWIS, the Phalanx 6-barrel Gatling gun. So that's what I did. And I had 6 years active, 2 in the reserves. And out of the 6 years active, I went to 27 different countries. People are always like, what? The Coast Guard leaves the coast? And on the bigger ships, we do some really cool stuff. And my first ship was on the East Coast out of Charleston, South Carolina. So our op area was the Caribbean. Not terrible at all.
I'm sorry. Thank you for your service, by the way.
Right? But I did mess cook and paint a lot. Okay, so I actually worked really hard. But we did drug busts. We did migrant ops, which that does suck. And that was not fun. That was really hard.
No, that's heavy. It's heavy duty work right there.
Yes. And then
now a quick question about earlier you mentioned gender roles and your father keeping you out of gender roles. How did that play in not just the Coast Guard, but in your field? From my recollection, fire control is not a unisex field, or hadn't been a unisex field. It was male dominated.
So
how did you fit in?
Yeah, so the Coast Guard is a little different in that we were the first service that allowed women on board ships. So we had women in a lot more roles than was typical in other services. we've just always been a little more open-minded, I think, about that kind of stuff. However, you are right. Weapons are traditionally a male-dominated workforce. And my first ship, so that recruiter had talked me out of getting a direct school out of boot camp. There was a $12,000 bonus for the school I wanted. So if I had done that, I would have gone to boot camp, gone straight to school, and made 12 grand. Well, he told me, you'll hate being on ships. You'll hate traveling. Like, this isn't what you want to do with your life, blah, blah, blah. You should go to boot camp and then go to a regular station first and see, the different rates in action and choose what you want to do. So I ended up on a ship anyways, minus the 12 grand and as a non-rate, which meant I got to paint, wash dishes, sort trash, and basically do all the shit nobody wants to do. And then I had to wait for school. So the first time I realized that my gender might be a problem was trying to get to school. I filled out, they call it a CHIT, right? It's a special request to get to school. And it was lost 14 times. And because it has to, you get it signed by all these people. It goes up through the chain of command, right?
Quite a run of bad luck there.
Yeah, it just kept getting lost. And in the meantime, everyone in leadership positions was trying to talk me out of it. Like, I don't know why you want to do this. This isn't a job for a female. You're going to hate your life, blah, blah, blah. Whereas I did everything I could to like weasel my way into a loader position. So I actually got to load with the gun crew for the Sea Whiz and like all of that stuff. I mean, I'm a hippie, don't get me wrong, but I learned to shoot when I was 5 years old. I have an immense respect for weapons and guns, whatever, however you want to call it. And the big thing for me was I was so fascinated with how they worked. Like, especially the Sea Whiz, which, oh my God, I could geek out on that so hard, but I won't right now. But like, I just wanted to know how they worked. And so anyway, I ended up mentioning to the captain of the ship one day, because I was his mess cook towards the end of my mess cook duties. And he's like, are you okay? I said, not really. I said, I'm trying to get to school and they keep losing my chit. And he was like, really? I said, yeah. He's like, what school are you trying to get into? And I said, fire control. And I'll never forget, he went, you want to be a fire controlman? And I said, yeah. And he said, and they keep losing your chit. And I was like, yep. And he went, okay. So hand route it all the way to me. If anyone tries to take it from you, you tell them by order of the captain, you're hand routing your request. And I was like, okay. So I did. And that's how I got to school. And then when I got there, I was sitting in a classroom with probably 25, 30 students. Our school for fire control has the highest dropout rate. It doesn't exist anymore, but it did because it's the hardest school in the Coast Guard. It's very, very challenging. You essentially get a 2-year electrical science degree in 6 months. So it's difficult. And I was the only female in the room. And the instructor said, so just so everyone in here knows, if Campbell passes this class, she will be the only female fire controlman in the entire Coast Guard. And I did not know that.
Was that a subtle challenge to the other male candidates, you think?
I don't know. I came to know some of the instructors pretty well. And I will say that I really don't think any of them particularly had beef with me or had an issue with me.
Good. Glad to hear that.
However, the senior chief in charge of the school did. And I think they followed orders by not really helping me, because I was third in the class up through like the first, I think, 2 months, two and a half months. And then the senior chief of the school pulled me aside in the hallway and told me that they had had 2 female fire control technicians in the Coast Guard before me, that they had finally gotten the women out of their rate, and that they didn't want any more because all we were was trouble. And keep in mind, I was an E2. He was an E9. I was slightly terrified. And I said, okay. And he's like, do you understand what I'm saying to you? And I said, I do. And he said, so what are you going to do about it? And I said, well, I'm going to do everything I can to pass this course. And he just looked at me and said, well, we both know where we stand then. And he walked away. And I was like, I don't know what that means, but I don't think it was good. And then from that point forward, anytime I had trouble or questions, like I'd raise my hand and none of the instructors would help me. They'd just walk past me. So I went from third from the top to third from the bottom, but I passed. And then when I got into C school, the second school, I was top of my class. Because I think at that point they were like, well, she's here. So
might as well deal with her.
Might as well help her because she's going to the fleet and we don't want to, screw one of our brothers over. So
well, that chat from the chief, the master chief must have been giving you warm fuzzies.
Yeah, it was, that year of school was one of the most stressful periods of my life. It was very isolating, very difficult. But I'm a stubborn little bastard and I was not going to give up. Like, honestly, if I had hit difficulties in the course without that, I'm not sure what would have happened. But because he said those things to me, I was going to make it. Like, no matter what, I would have made it.
You don't strike me as a wilting flower. That's for sure.
No. And I used to be, I'm much better these days, but I definitely used to be the type of person where it's like, if you tell me I can't do something, I will find a way, even if it wasn't something I wanted to do. Like, if you tell me I can't do it, I'm gonna find a way, and I'm gonna be successful at it. Now I go by the beat of my own drum. I don't take direction that way, but I used to.
Well, Coast Guard, pretty cool, I guess.
It was awesome. I mean, so like I said, I didn't go in thinking I wanted vocational help or any of that. Like, I was pretty set on what I wanted.
You just wanted to tour. You wanted to go see things.
Yeah, I just wanted to travel, and I did. Holy cow! Like I said, 27 countries, right, in 5 years. It was amazing. I swam in the Arctic Sea. I'm a golden dragon. I'm a shellback. I'm a polar bear. So for those of you that don't know,
thank you.
Yeah. So being a shellback means you've crossed the equator. So I've done that many, many, many times, to the point where I've actually sat on Neptune's court. And if you're a sailor, you know what that means. Golden dragon means you've crossed the 180. And so I've done that twice now. And then polar bear is crossing into the Arctic Circle, which I've also done multiple times. I think I've been up there I did 5 patrols up in the Bering Sea. So
I'm getting secondhand frostbite.
It's cold. Like I said, I took a swim up there. We did a morale swim, and water got inside my dry suit and actually started seizing up my muscles. And I had to get hoisted back onto the ship, which was so embarrassing. Oh my God. Yeah, I was getting hypothermia, but whatever. I was so embarrassed. But it was amazing. Yeah.
But you've swam somewhere that how many people have? You could probably count it in the mere thousands of people that have done it.
Probably, huh? That's kind of crazy. I've never really thought about it like that. Yeah, it was awesome. It was awesome. So, it was a decision I made on a fluke, joining the Coast Guard. Ended up staying in for a total of 8 years, because after I left active duty, I did 2 more in the reserves.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to work for a semiconductor company because of my background in electronics. Right. Because, like I said, I got the 2-year degree in electrical science from my schooling in the Coast Guard. Because working on the weapons system, I actually worked on computers and radars. I was a micro miniature solderer, so soldering under microscopes and things like that. Yeah, very techie. And so when I got out, I had all of those jobs open to me working in that field. But I wanted to be a teacher still. So I went back to school to be a first grade teacher, but took a job working at a semiconductor company to pay the bills, because back then the GI Bill wasn't shit. It's not like it is these days.
I recall.
It didn't even fully pay for my school. Like, I had to take student loans out to help pay for the rest of my education. And while I was there is when I discovered technical writing. And my boss at the time, she was so awesome. Linda Zitzner. I still remember her. She was such an amazing mentor for me getting out of the Coast Guard, because that was very difficult. I went from being around primarily men for 6 years on board ship, right? So not only like I was the only female in the weapons division on my ship for a long time, but out of 180 crew, which is what our ship typically had, max 20 females usually on the boat. So not a lot of girls. So, you know, we were sailors and we acted like sailors. And so I went from that to working in an office full of women. And I remember one of the most difficult things for me was just figuring out what to wear every day. Like, I was so used to blue pants, blue shirt, blue, overshirt, boots, hat, done.
Ponytail, go.
Yeah, because even like I wore my hair in a bun, right? And even your jewelry is regulated. Everything's regulated. Like, you don't have to make hardly any choices. You just wear what they tell you. And so now, like, I had to like not only choose what to wear, but I had to be like pretty, which was like very strange for me. I had never really spent much time thinking about that. And when I think back to some of the things I wore, I really needed some help, Dan. Like,
you know what?
Really bad.
It was a learning experience. You did the best you could. It
That's
seemed
right.
like a good idea at the time. I'm sure we could fill show after show after episode after episode on transitional difficulties. I mean, you talk to any veteran, they're going to have similar stories just like that. I'm sure you're not the first woman that's had to learn how to dress for the office politics, all the social rules, the unspoken social rules that go into an office.
Oh my
also.
Gosh. Yes.
Those, I mean, and what do you mean? Yeah, I can't say the fuck word.
Oh no, I have to tell you this story because this is like my favorite from this office. There was a girl I worked with who was like, she was tall but petite, like bird-like, right? Mm-hmm. And I was at the copier one day. And so the first month I worked at this place, I just kept my mouth shut. I was so terrified I would say the wrong thing because I was surrounded by women and they were just so different. Like, I can't even explain. I was just like, I don't even know how to be right now. But I was at the copier and something must have happened, but she like jumped back and she goes, "Oh my God, are you okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, why?" And she's like, "Well, you just cursed." And I was like, "I did?" She's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "What did I say?" She's like, "Well, you said shit, Adrian." And I laughed so hard, I think I almost fell over. And she was so shocked. And I was like, "I'm sorry, I just can't even." I was like, "Are you really upset because I said shit?" She's like, "The S word?" "Yes, Adrian." And I was like, "Oh my God, I can never open my mouth again. Like, they're going to fire me tomorrow."
Just zip it. Just don't say anything. Just head nods. And memos, written memos.
Yep, absolutely. And yeah, we could talk about transition forever because so my whole dissertation was on for my doctorate. It was all about military transition, right?
Right. I've heard you talk about your work, your research. You do a lot of work with veterans in the transition and how difficult that can be.
Yeah. Yeah. And part of it is because of my own experience and like the not knowing what to wear thing. Like when you go to the TAPS class, right? The transition assistance program, when you're getting out, they like teach you how to wear a suit because that's all we wear when we get jobs. But they don't tell you like how weird it's going to be to just wear jeans and a t-shirt every day. Like that is fucking weird, man. Like after wearing a uniform or like even like not steel-toed boots. Because I can't tell you how many times I've almost broken a toe. Like when I first got out, especially because I was just used to having a boot on. And you use your feet to do things. It kind of sounds weird, but you know what I'm talking about, right?
I know exactly what you mean. It's to move something or to prop it or to lead it towards something. Yeah,
exactly. And that's an example of like somatic and a somatic experience, right? Is the things that we put on our body change the way that we feel. Like I'm sure you probably know this too, or have experienced this. When you're in a uniform, you sit up straighter. Like your posture often changes.
It's hard to slouch when you're in a nicely starched uniform.
Yep. And then we've been trained, right? Like, I mean, literally it was like beat into us. Like, this is how you stand in this uniform. You show that uniform respect, blah, 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 blah. Anyway. And so, what you put on your body actually changes the way that you perceive yourself, the way you perceive your person in the world, how people react to you, your assumptions about how they react. Anyways, but that kind of stuff I think matters, and it's stuff that we need to talk about more that are in transition. But again, a whole nother episode.
Yes.
This is all about me.
all about Dr. Adrian Campbell.
That's right.
You got a job in the tech field. Is where we left off.
That's right. So
you said you wanted to go back to teaching, but you got a job in tech to support yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Did you stay in tech?
So I did for a very long time. The boss that I was telling you about, she's who turned me on to technical writing. And she said, Adrian, you have like a really natural skill for this, which a lot of people don't have. So I kind of moved into that, realized I could make a lot of money without a college education. So I stopped going to school. And I worked for a semiconductor company. I worked for a medical device company. I worked in geophysics for a little bit, all doing technical writing. I really liked going from company to company because I like fixing things. So I intentionally would take jobs at places that had problems and go in and like help them sort it out and get things, on track. And then when things were flowing smooth, I'd look for another job and learn something new. And then I eventually ended up in nuclear, which was a surprise to me. But I was living in Colorado. After I got out of the military, I had moved to Colorado, which I loved and still do this day. And then got offered a job out in San Onofre, the nuclear plant down, in San Onofre, just south of San Clemente, the boobs on the side of the highway that everyone in California, Southern California knows.
Right, the famous California boobs.
Yeah. And it was awesome. It was great. The pay was amazing. The office that I worked with, the guys I worked with were fantastic. Almost all of us were prior service military. So it was comfortable in a way that I can't even begin to explain unless you're a vet. If you're a veteran, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. We really had a great time, but the work hours were hard and the environment was very, very stressful because, it's nuclear. Like if you mess up, kind of like military, you mess up, people die, right? Like
there's consequences, to failure and mistakes.
It's not just a typo in the TPS report. like bad things could happen. But
what did you do there? Were you still doing technical writing?
No, I was teaching. So I was actually teaching electronics there. And like we redesigned the entire maintenance training program. So like all the maintenance departments got together with like the line crew and the training instructors, and we rebuilt like the whole program, which was crazy, enormous project, but beautiful.
So you're talking about getting elbow deep in the nuts and bolts of an organizational chart, which is kind of a big deal for a big organization like that.
Yeah, and we're accredited too. So nuclear training is accredited through the government. So there's a lot of rules you got to follow and steps you got to take. And then on top of it, the majority of the workers are union employees. So tons of negotiation with union and management. And I think it took us at least a year, maybe a year and a half. It was a really big project. And a big part of it, my favorite part of it, it's not a big part of it. My favorite part was that I got to build a soldering lab. So like I mentioned in the Coast Guard, I did micro miniature soldering. Yeah, I built out $100,000 lab for us. And it was my favorite. I don't miss a lot of the tech work with what I do now. Like I really don't, but I miss soldering. I really geeked out on that stuff. It was fun. Excuse me. But yeah, so that's what I did there. And about a year and a half in, I started going back to school because I had the GI Bill. They had upgraded it to the new post 9/11 GI Bill. So they actually would pay for all of your schooling. And I thought, well, if I'm going to make it in management in a corporate environment, I should probably get a college degree, you know? And I went to University of Phoenix because they took the most of my military credits. It was easy. I only had to do another 1.5 years, and I had a bachelor's in psychology. But in that time frame, while I was going to school there, I was also playing roller derby. And I wrecked really hard and tore my rotator cuff, hurt my neck, got a pretty good concussion. And right around that time, we were working like 10 to 12 hour days, 5 to 6 days a week. So between, I think, the physical injury and the stress of the job, I ended up getting really sick. I got what's called occipital neuralgia. So I'm about to go into a whole nother section here. So if you have any questions about nuclear, ask me now before we transition.
Got a big shift coming up here.
There is a big shift. That's right.
And knowing you, I think I know where this is leading to. This is
the biggie.
Yeah.
It's the biggie. All right, are you ready?
I'm ready. You ready?
I'm ready. Okay. So I got what's called occipital neuralgia, which is essentially where your neck muscles get so tight that they pinch off your optical nerves going into your eyes. And so the way it manifested for me is I would get really bad headaches that would start here. And then eventually I'd get stabbing pain in the back of my neck, like at the base of my skull. It took 10 months for them to diagnose me. And within that 10 months, it just got worse and worse and worse. And I got to a point where I was getting spots in my vision because if it's not treated, you eventually go blind. It's really bad. And they kept saying it was migraines, and I really didn't think it was. So they finally figured it out, and Western medicine's solution was shooting nerve blocks into my head and neck. So nerve blocks are given through needles like this long, and they just literally stab you in the head and shoot this stuff in, right? Really painful.
That seems like the most logical option.
Yeah, right. And at the time I was taking muscle relaxers, Vicodin, and Motrin pretty much 24 hours a day. And I was still in pain. Like that's how bad the pain from the headaches were. And I have a pretty high tolerance. I was an asshole is the easiest way to put it. I still feel bad for my poor sister who did the majority of taking care of me during that time. I was not kind. I was not nice. I was
no pain. Pain will do that to somebody. It'll alter one's mood for sure.
Yep. So they sent me to the pain management clinic to do the nerve blocks, and every time they did it, I would lose my equilibrium, so I couldn't even walk back to the parking lot without help. So my sister would take me and then drive me home, and after 2 or 3, and I'd have to take 2 days off work. So after I think we did this 3 times, I went back and was like, okay, so, but like, what's the long-term solution? And they said, that's it. That's your long-term solution. And I refused to accept that because I'm me. And I went to my neurologist and threw a fit like a 2-year-old, screaming and yelling. Like, this is bullshit. Because I think I was 31, maybe 32. I mean, I was young. And he said, well, you could try acupuncture if you want, like super flippantly. And I was like, you know what? Why not? You're already sticking needles in my head. So let's
maybe
try
I will.
Yeah, let's try this hippie shit. I don't care. So I was very, again, we talked about the story up to this point. There's nothing hippy dippy in my story up until this point. I was left brain.
Kind of not necessarily anti-hippy dippy, but nothing that would speak to the path from here on out.
Yeah, if somebody had given me a crystal back then, I would have been like, cool.
So
I don't know what I'm supposed to do with that.
Just to be clear, it's what's about to happen is a tangible removal of a great amount of pain and a potentially life-threatening condition.
Yeah. Oh my God. I
Brought on,
remember being
brought on,
terrified.
Western medicine didn't solve this.
No. Yeah. So I would go to acupuncture. Within 1 month, I was off all the drugs, all of them. And I remember being like, oh, I get teary again. Because it was like so incredible. After being in so much pain for so long, the relief was just incredible. And I remember like sitting down, I was never like huge religious, but I've always honestly been pretty spiritual. I don't think you can go to the Bering Sea and not be spiritual, to be honest. But I remember like talking to God and just being like, look, this is insane. Like, I can't believe how this changed everything. Like, just putting some little needles in me. Like, I don't understand. And I said, you got 6 months. I'll believe whatever you throw my way. I'm like, I'm open. Let's go. And next thing you know, I found a retreat for mindfulness-based stress reduction, mindfulness meditation, which is a retreat I'm actually leaving for tomorrow. Yeah. So this was 11 years ago. So I went to this retreat in Colorado, learned meditation. First day, super angry, super pissed off, couldn't meditate for anything. By the third day, I sat for 45 minutes and I couldn't believe it, right? My mind had finally like gotten quiet. Leaving there, I went to my first Reiki session and it completely blew my mind. Like, I remember having this huge emotional release and crying. I was so freaked out when I laid down on the table, I wouldn't close my eyes. I told the lady, I'm like, I don't know what you're going to do to me. I'm really uncomfortable, but a good friend recommended this. So like, you just got to walk me through it. And she was like, no problem. She's like, you can keep your eyes open. You can watch what I do. And I was like, okay. I'm gonna. And so like when I started crying, I was like, what is happening? What are you doing to me? And she started laughing, which was very disconcerting to me. And she said, well, I have this effect on people a lot, actually. And then the tears just stopped. And I felt this huge relief. And all of a sudden, like, I could breathe so much deeper. It was insane. And at the end of that, I told her, I'll pay you whatever you want to make this keep happening in my life. And she laughed and she said, well, you can get certified and give yourself Reiki. And I was like, get out of here. She said, no, really. And I'm like, I'm going to do it. How do you do it? Right. So I left Colorado. I went home, found a teacher, did a session with her. Cause again, still kind of freaked out by all this weirdness. Didn't know how it worked. Just knew it was cool. Had a great session, went through the training and never anticipated giving another person Reiki. Definitely didn't think I'd become a teacher. But the minute my hands lit up with that energy, I felt like a Jedi. Like, I was like, what is this magic? And I remember the other people in the room were like, oh yeah, this is cool. Like, let's go practice. And I was like, how are you so calm that you have like energy coming out of your hands right now? Like, this is the coolest shit I've ever seen in my life. And I wanted to give it to everybody. So I just started calling all my friends and I'm like, hey, I do Reiki now. They're like, what is that? I'm like, it's this crazy thing. And then very shortly, I'd say within the first 6 months, like I was just giving it to friends, I started seeing auras and what I now know are chakras, like color centers on people's bodies. And I thought I was completely losing my mind. Like I totally thought the headaches broke something in there. I went to my teacher and she explained like we talked about it and she's like, it sounds like that's just, you're seeing an aura and the chakras. And I said, how do you control this? What do you do? And she's like, I don't know. I don't see that stuff. Because the crazy thing about Reiki is it opens up your gifts. So apparently I could always do this and just didn't know.
You've been squandering it the whole time.
The whole time. So I researched because that's what I do. And I found every book that I could possibly find on auras, the bioenergetic field, the chakra system. And I read and I read and I read until I came to the conclusion that this shit's real. It's been around for thousands of years. We just don't have the technology to prove it. And because there's no like financial benefit to proving it, we probably won't.
Right.
like why would we?
There's the old argument about modern healthcare and that there's no profit in getting people well.
Right. Right. Like if I can like help people feel better and like heal disease and like all that kind of stuff without drugs, I'm almost like dangerous to pharmaceutical industries, right? Like, yeah. So anyway, so that's how I got into Reiki. I was working in the nuke plant, started doing all this crazy stuff. Then the nuke plant, they started noticing I was changing the way I was teaching my electronics courses. So they asked if I wanted to take over the leadership program. So I shifted into leadership, and then the plant got shut down. I kept going in school, found my master's PhD program through Pacifica, fell madly in love with the curriculum there, the professors there, the campus. So started that while I was living kind of off my severance package from the plant. And then I got offered a job at the nuke plant in Missouri. And so moved out to Missouri where my best friend was at, Shannon. And I kept doing the Reiki stuff on the side. Oh, and I had gotten certified as a coach while I was laid off as well. So I went through a year-long coaching program and got certified as a coach. So I was doing Reiki, I was coaching, got kind of bored, to be honest, because I just need a little more spice. Grad school helped with that, but I think part of me kind of missed the technical industry. So when I got offered the job out here, I was like, okay, let's go do it. Built up all their leadership programs for them, and that was real cool. But as my PhD progressed, I needed to spend more time focusing on it. So I ended up leaving the nuclear industry and starting my own leadership development business. And I did that for a few years while I was finishing my PhD.
Well, finishing your PhD while working leadership in nuclear sounds like an overflowing plate.
It was, and it really was. It was, yeah.
So it was a wise choice.
Yeah. I don't regret it. I really don't. Yeah.
And now you have what you have now, which still seems like a series of good choices.
I think so. And it just today I had a big spark about well, you and I talked about it, about this business that I want to start excuse me, next year. And it's just taking all my research and moving it forward. And I think that's kind of the thing. Like, ever since I started working with Reiki, it was just like my path just became so clear and everything just moves out of the way to help me continue to go where I'm going. And like, I can see what I'm doing now, what I'm working on, what I'm building. And I can look back and see exactly why I went to the places I did, met the people I did. Like, it all comes together in this like really beautifully woven tapestry. And so I'm excited to see like where we go next.
Well, I'll have to come be a guest host a year from now.
Oh, that would be fun.
So we could catch up. Where were we last year? We'll have to rewind the tape. But where are you right now? What is the Energetic Psyche with Dr. Adrian Campbell? What is Dr. Adrian Campbell doing right now?
So right now, like, I just got back from traveling around the country for a couple years, finishing the PhD. And so now I have a holistic wellness practice. I'm based out of Columbia, Missouri, but to be honest, the majority of my clients, well, I'd say 50-50 client-wise, are on the phone or online. And the other ones I meet here in town in Columbia. I have an office that I work out of at Innate Health and Wellness. And on top of my one-on-one work, I teach. So I have energy healing classes. I have 2 Reiki classes coming up in April. I have an event that I'm doing in April. It's called Transcendence here in Columbia. And I'll be speaking both days. I'm working on finishing up 6 books.
Yes. As a writer, I love hearing about this part.
I know everyone's like, what? I'm a bit of an overachiever. 2 are
coming out with 6 books all at once. Yeah.
Well, three are basically written. They're written. I'm just reformatting for a different print style. And they're all related to energy. So there's my Reiki 1 and 2 training manual. There's energy healing for mental health, which I'm also I have a retreat on that this year. It's only half full. So if you're interested, go to my website. You can sign up. And then I also have a chakra exploration workbook. I have how to teach Reiki your way. So just giving more support to Reiki masters, and then how to make money as a Reiki practitioner, which is just a simple book to help people that do Reiki that want to make a little bit of cash. I mean, it's not going to make you a millionaire, but just, again, more support for people that do Reiki, because I think the world could just use more of it, you know? So those are the books that I'm putting together. Oh, and a dream journal, which should be really cool too. So Jungian dream theory.
Just you've showed me some of the early concept art for the dream journal, and I think it's going to look fantastic and be
awesome.
Just a great thing to draw out what's in your head at night and make something bear fruit. I just love the idea of the dream journal coming to life.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm hoping to get all of these formatted, written, published by mid-April. And so they'll be up on my website at that point. And then academic wise, so like that's all my energy stuff, right? Classes, retreats, the books. But I also am an independent scholar. And so I do research and I present internationally as well as in the US. But honestly, I haven't presented in the US for a few years. But the majority of my research is on the unconscious mind and the somatic experience and grief, as well as military and first responder dis-ease is what I'm going to say. I really try not to focus on just trauma because I feel like there's enough people doing that. And I like looking at first responders and military holistically as people and how I can help them better deal with the traumatic situations they're in versus just like a retroactive or a reactive dealing with their trauma. So like the research that I'm doing, I'm presenting in Sicily at the end of the summer for the International Association of Analytical Psychology's European 2024 conference.
And where again is this?
In Sicily.
Oh boy.
I know. I'm Sicilian and I've never been, so I can't wait to eat all the things. I mean, enjoy the country, but yes, eat all the things.
Right.
And it's about disassociation and first responders. So I'm really excited to move into not just military, because Coast Guard, we're very military and first responder. And I've primarily focused on military up until now. So I'm pretty excited to move into supporting our first responders as well. And looking at ways that I can find to help them, like I said, deal with stuff before it gets bad. You know?
Right. That's great. As former military and former first responder, you just find yourself in abnormal situations on a regular basis that you have no frame of reference for. And the normal, if there's such a thing, the mind can't compute and digest how to handle what you've just experienced. So I think your work is extraordinarily valuable.
Thanks. I appreciate that, Daniel. Yeah, I'm really excited, and I'm really grateful that I've gotten to a place in my life where I'm able to do this. You know, I've worked really hard for a long time. A lot of the jobs I've had have demanded some pretty serious hours, and I've often, worked full time while going to school, while running a practice. And, I'm finally at a point where I'm able to focus on the projects that bring me the most joy. Even my research about grief, which sounds crazy, but like one of my like pinnacle moments in my academic life so far was presenting at the Jungian Institute last summer in Switzerland. Like, what? Oh my God. I don't think I'll ever stop being excited about this kind of stuff. It's
Switzerland so cool. And then Sicily coming up. I'm curious what's going to happen next year.
I don't even know. But I'm hoping to take all of this research and start creating, at a minimum, CEU courses for therapists and psychologists.
CEU?
Yeah, so it's continuing education units, so that they can use my research.
Sure,
work,
of course.
Right.
That would be valuable for others.
Yeah, and I think one of the skills I have a lot of researchers don't necessarily have is making things practical and actionable. So I'm really hoping to be able to take my research and translate it into something that is usable by the psychological community, and then hopefully even go from there into first responders and military, and maybe create training that they can use to develop skills moving forward to protect themselves. Yeah.
So it's not just a full plate. You have several full plates, but it seems to
Right.
make you happy, and you seem to be managing them all very well.
Hey, thanks. I'm glad it looks that way.
It appears that way from the outside.
Yeah.
We're at
We're
or
at
near our
time.
time limit.
Yeah.
But I want to ask you what you always ask all of your guests.
Yeah.
What's one thing that you think everybody should know?
Oh, yeah. Good question. It's my question, but I like it.
Right. That's a great question that I came up with.
I'm so glad I came up with it. I would say to give yourself grace, like to be kind to yourself and to go easy on yourself. I think that is the one thing that so many of us really suck at, because it's so easy. Like, I mean, I always give the example of just like, hitting your elbow on a door. Oh, good job, Adrian. Right? Instead, like, that's not what you would say to like your kid or your pet, or whatever. Like, give yourself some compassion, give yourself some love, because I think that if more of us had more compassion and love in our lives, that the world would be an infinitely better place. Everyone fucks up. Everybody. There's not, it's just the way it is. We're human. We're all just making our way through the world. So just give yourself a little bit of grace, and it's okay. We'll work it out. So yeah.
It's a crazy world. You gotta give yourself grace, because you're right. Everybody fucks up, and we just do the best we can with the resources that we've been given, and it's just a crazy world.
Absolutely.
And that's our time.
I think so. So we'll go ahead and sign off. Daniel, thank you so much for interviewing me today. I really appreciate it, and I've enjoyed our time together.
It was my pleasure entirely. You're going to have a lot of this information about your upcoming retreat and class in the links below. Excellent.
Yep. I'll post the links on like the Facebook and all of that. But if you're on a platform, like if you end up watching this on YouTube or listening on Spotify later, just go to my website, which is www.energeticpsyche.com. All the information that you need for anything is there. And you can always just write me a message. I'm pretty approachable. So there's that. All right. Well, sayonara. See you later.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much for joining us this week on the Energetic Psyche. Remember, we live stream every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. I hope to see you again, and I hope you have a great rest of your week. Take care.